the great theoretical physicist, the mastermind behind the invention of the atomic bomb, the one who led the Manhattan Project, Robert Oppenheimer, who suffered things in his life such as schizophrenia and depression. Well, that's because he's a genius and he contributed to the best military invention the world ever seen, the atomic bomb. Robert Oppenheimer. Let's imagine Robert Oppenheimer was a Muslim. Let's actually imagine he was a Muslim. Let's give him a Muslim name. Instead of Oppenheimer, let's call him Omar Haidar. What would the narrative be? Ladies and gentlemen,
we may be approaching a fateful hour.
The world's most evil act happened in the history of mankind.
10, 9.
An invention made by this devilish Luciferian who came up with a machine that is responsible for the killings of 226,000 civilians.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The world's biggest terrorist, Omar Haidar, who learned this evil tactic since he was young, who wanted to poison his peers with an apple. The world's most wanted person, this radical Muslim, there's nothing more evil than that. This is something everyone should condemn day and night for the next century and on and on and on.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
But wait, Robert Oppenheimer was not a Muslim. Oh, he's a white boy. White boy. Robert Oppenheimer. He cannot be devilish. He cannot be evil. No, he's schizophrenic. Poor little Robert, he was battling with depression within himself. Even though he wanted to poison someone with an apple, kill his peers, and went through certain things in his life, that's not evil. He was just suffering with mental illness. Because he's that white boy. And who led the Manhattan Project. With all seriousness here, he is a person who contributed to the world's most casualty death of 226,000 plus civilians, not military personnel. Let that sink in for a second. Even though he didn't want to do it, but then later he understood, he knew that this could have this type of effect. How easy the narrative shifts automatically if that person was a Muslim. I'm not saying it should be justified if he's a Muslim, absolutely not. This is such an evil thing, such an evil invention that threatens the extinction of mankind as we know it today. Now let me give you another example. Let's just imagine that those devilish terrorists who happened to hijack an airplane and crash into the Twin Towers. Let's just imagine those people were white people. Would that narrative be the same? And let's also imagine that New York City is a city in Japan. Then let's fast forward 50 years from now, and Hollywood would like to make a movie about this. Ladies and gentlemen, the mastermind behind this attack, such a genius who came up with a way to manipulate the world's superpower airport and steal an airplane and maneuver through the buildings of Japan and crashing into the Twin Towers. A person who was suffering mental illnesses, but he didn't want this invention to go like that. But then they took his invention and then they bombed these buildings. How would that make you feel? Let that sink in for a second. Not because Japanese are less of humans than you, it would be the same. Killing casualties is killing casualties regardless of what ethnicity, background, or human being you are. This is a devilish act. And you would ask, why would you bring religion into this? What does religion has to do with this? First of all, by the way, the first atomic bomb test was called Trinity. And they quote a poem about a triumph god. This is what Robert Oppenheimer said, and you can check it out. This is the narrative of what Hollywood and the mainstream media have been doing for a long period of time. If the devilish attack has been made by a Muslim, they put the sticker of a terrorist so that they can brainwash people that Islam is involved, Islam is the reason and responsibility for this. If you take the casualties of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, take the casualties of all the things that the West have done in the previous century, and the casualties have been made by people who call themselves Muslims, it's incomparable. You cannot compare both. It's massively different. There's a big difference in numbers. And surprisingly, Prophet Muhammad clearly said a person who kills a non-Muslim, a mu'ahid, a person who's a non-Muslim who's living in our midst, if a person kills that innocent civilian, in our context, it is used as a word of civilian, then Prophet Muhammad said that person will never even smell the fragrance of paradise, meaning that person will end up in hellfire. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has always taught his followers, peace and blessings be upon him, to never ever attack a civilian no matter what the circumstance is. Even in battle, even in the military. And there are rules and regulations in Islam where you cannot attack an elderly or a young person or a woman, and there are criteria you have to follow even in the midst of the battlefield. But how come the narrative that Islam is being spread by a sword? What sword? What sword Islam being spread by? A sword. Showing Muslims or Arabs are backward infidels who are a threat to life. And these are just funny things. Those movies, those things, it brainwashes people. Now imagine if Hollywood was in Afghanistan and they would like to show you movies about the Crusaders and the KKK and the Spaniards and Mussolini and Hitler, and associate all these things with Christianity. Or perhaps bring Judaism in it. It will be easy for them. The reason why I made this video for you, to let that sink in for a second. If you're a Muslim, ask yourself a question that why wouldn't they make a movie about Muslim scholars and their inventions? Why wouldn't they do that? Why wouldn't they make a movie about Al-Zahari and the invention of the world's modern day surgical instruments, or the Muslim invention of university, or the Muslim invention of the PhD, a Muslim scholar who invented the camera, Ibn al-Haytham, the father of optics. And he's the one who laid out physics in which we know today way before Robert Oppenheimer. Hollywood is never interested. Universal Studios and all the directors, they're not interested in these types of movies. Why? Because they're Muslims. Very simple. What happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki is an unforgivable catastrophe done by so-called superpower that should actually pay back to Japan than act like policemen to police this entire world and invade countries such as Iraq, accusing them of having weapons of mass destruction. The only one who did this mass destruction is the United States of America. Am I against the United States of America? Am I against Western people? Am I against white people? Number one, I'm not racist. And I don't think that white people are bad people. I'm using this rhetoric to prove a point that how the Western media use mental illness, schizophrenic, depression, when it's associated with an evil act of that person was white. This is refuting a narrative that is used as a tactic for media outlets. And I don't think its people is just like its foreign policy. Here I'm criticizing its foreign policy because of the freedom of speech that I have in this country and anywhere in this world. This is all I have. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.